What if everything you thought you knew about yourself, that stable, continuous you're experiencing the world, was actually a meticulously crafted, dynamic illusion woven by your own brain?
Mm-mm.
It's a question that can really stop you in your tracks.
Yeah.
And it's the core of what we're diving into today on the Deep Dive.
Yeah.
We're plunging into the profound and often counterintuitive work of a fascinating mind, philosopher, and neuroscientist, Thomas Metzinger.
Right.
His ideas don't just challenge our fundamental assumptions about consciousness, the self, even reality itself. They get right to the heart of what it means to be you right now as you listen.
Indeed. And our mission for this deep dive is, well, to unpack Metzinger's most compelling ideas,
Okay.
to understand the key themes and findings from his extensive research and collaborations, and maybe most importantly, explore why these complex philosophical and scientific insights are incredibly relevant to your everyday experiences. We'll be connecting these, sometimes pretty abstract concepts to everything from how you perceive the color of a sunrise to how you try and sometimes fail to control your own thoughts, and even how you grapple with those really profound questions about life and death.
That's right. This isn't just about abstract philosophical debates happening somewhere else. This is a journey directly into your own mind and how it constructs your reality. We'll be drawing from a diverse array of sources today, from rigorous scientific papers on brain function and perception to deep philosophical inquiries into the nature of the mind,
Right.
and even cutting-edge discussions on emerging tech like virtual reality. It's a truly interdisciplinary adventure.
It really is.
So let's start by tackling perhaps Metzinger's most provocative claim right off the bat, a statement that seems to fly in the face of our most fundamental intuition. I, the elusive self. Not a thing, but a process. Okay, so Thomas Metzinger has this pretty bold statement he's famous for, one that almost sounds like a riddle. There is no such thing as a self.
Right. The big one.
Okay. And my immediate reaction to that is, wait, what? But I feel like I'm a self, a consistent entity, a me that persists through time.
Yeah.
That feels like such a strong, undeniable, intuitive experience we all have.
Absolutely.
But he insists this isn't some fringe New Age idea trying to get you to disassociate or anything. He actually clarifies it. For many scientists and philosophers working in this field, it's, well, he calls it a pretty strong consensus, something almost trivial in his discipline. What exactly is he getting at here when he says there's no self in that sense?
That's a perfect reaction, honestly, because it highlights the very paradox Metzinger is trying to unravel. He's absolutely not saying you don't feel like you're someone, or that your rich subjective experience isn't real. Far from it.
Okay.
What he's challenging is the traditional, maybe even ancient, notion of the self as a substance.
A substance, like a soul or some core thing.
Exactly. Think of it this way. He rejects the idea that the self is an independent entity, a distinct thing that could exist on its own, separate from a living brain.
Ah, I see.
He calls this traditional view ontologically self-subsistent, meaning it exists fundamentally on its own terms, and he dismisses the idea of a homunculus, little person inside your skull pulling the levers as a dopey idea. So it's not an attack on your subjective reality. It's really a clarification of its fundamental nature, shifting it from a noun to a verb almost.
From a noun to a verb. I like that. So if the self isn't a fixed, independent thing, a permanent soul or inner driver, then what is it? What is you, according to Metzinger?
Well, what he emphasizes is very robust and very real, is what he terms the phenomenal self.
Phenomenal self.
Yeah. This is that distinct, undeniable feeling of being someone, that persistent sense of me that appears consistently and powerfully in your conscious experience.
Right. The feeling I have right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But here's the crucial reframing. This self isn't a static entity, an unchanging core. Instead, it's a dynamic, constantly unfolding process.
A process, like a river always flowing, always changing, but still identifiable as the river.
That's a great analogy. It's like a perpetually generated experience rather than a fixed object sitting there.
And the implications of thinking about it that way.
Yeah.
They must be pretty profound for how you view your own identity over time.
Oh, absolutely. If your sense of self isn't a fixed, unchanging entity, but this dynamic, unfolding process, how might that change how you think about your personal identity from moment to moment or year to year?
Yeah.
Does the you today really feel exactly like the you from a decade ago? Probably less than you think if you really dig into it.
True.
And think about self-improvement. It suggests identities is something you're continually constructing and refining, not just discovering some pre-existing blueprint.
So it makes personal growth more active, an ongoing project.
Precisely. An active, ongoing process rather than trying to fit into some static mold.
Okay. And to really drive home how our brain creates this persistent feeling of me and our experience of the world, Metzinger uses that powerful metaphor, the ego tunnel.
Ah, yes, the ego tunnel. It's an incredibly vivid image.
It really is. What's the core idea there?
Well, he explains that while our knowledge of the external world is very real and exists independently of us, the chair is really there, the sun is really shining, our conscious experience of it is a locally determined phenomenon.
Locally determined.
Yeah.
Meaning determined by my brain.
Exactly. What you consciously perceive, what shows up in your subjective reality, is fundamentally shaped and constrained by the specific properties and processes of your brain. It's an internal construction, a model generated inside your head.
So our nervous systems don't just passively receive reality, they actively build a version of it.
Precisely. Our biological nervous systems don't give us raw, unfiltered reality. They produce a virtual model of the world, a dynamic internal simulation.
Like a movie.
Yeah, think of it as your brain creating a continuous, incredibly convincing movie of reality, perfectly synchronized and immersive. And here's the crucial twist, the part that makes it so compelling. This virtual model is ordinarily phenomenally transparent.
Phenomenally transparent. Okay, break that down.
It means you look through it as if you were in direct and immediate contact with reality, without ever realizing it's a representation or simulation.
Wow.
Your brain experiences its own internal model as unquestionably real, leading to what Metzinger calls naive realism.
Naive realism?
Yeah.
Because we naively think we're seeing reality directly.
Exactly. It's like wearing a pair of perfectly clear, invisible glasses that are subtly distorting everything, but you can't tell because you've never known reality without them.
And that transparency has some truly profound implications, doesn't it? It's not just an abstract idea. It fundamentally shakes the very ground of what we consider objective truth in our daily lives.
It really does. Metzinger argues it can lead to bad philosophical arguments about things like direct acquaintance with reality or infallible first-person knowledge.
Because we're mistaking the model for the real thing.
Precisely. Because our brain presents its own internal model as absolute reality, it tricks us into believing our perceptions are objective truth when in fact they are a constructed reality.
And this isn't just theory. It directly impacts how you, the listener, perceive your own daily experience. For instance, can you ever truly see the representational nature of your own reality? Or are you always looking through it, convinced it's the unvarnished truth?
Right. Think about eyewitness testimony or just trusting your own memory of an event. How reliable is it, really, if it's based on this constructed model?
Yeah, that's unsettling.
It is. But understanding this transparency also helps explain common, almost mundane features of consciousness itself. For example, Metzinger discusses convolved holism.
Convolved holism sounds complex.
Think of it like a symphony. Individual notes might be orange or sweet, but the true conscious experience of holding an orange isn't just those notes played separately. It's the entire integrated, rich chord of sight, smell, touch, maybe even anticipation.
Oh, okay. The whole is more than the sum of its parts.
Exactly. Each part gives meaning to the whole, and the whole defines the parts. He also talks about dynamicity consciousness, fundamentally representing change and duration, not just static snapshots. It flows. And then there's homogeneity, which describes how sensory qualia, like the feeling of red, are grainless and ultra-smooth, not resolvable into smaller perceptible units.
Ultra smooth, like you don't see tiny pixels of red.
Exactly. When you perceive a red, you don't sense tiny subpixels of red, do you? It's a smooth, seamless feeling. Metzinger argues that this ultra-smooth quality is a property of your brain's internal model, not necessarily a direct reflection of the physical world's granular reality.
So these features, holism, dynamicity, homogeneity, they're features of the model, not necessarily of reality itself.
That's the key insight. They remind us that even the simplest sensory input is deeply constructed by the brain.
Okay. And if that's how our brain constructs even simple sensations, how does it build something as fundamental as our very basic sense of being, that core feeling of me?
Well, that brings us to what Metzinger calls minimal phenomenal selfhood, or MPS.
MPS.
This is, as he describes it, the simplest form of self-consciousness and a global property of the conscious mind. It's like the bedrock you.
The ground floor, you said.
Yeah, the irreducible ground floor of your sense of self. And it's characterized by three key dimensions.
Okay, what are they?
The first is a globalized identification with the body as a whole, that fundamental, often unconscious sense of owning your entire physical body. It's the feeling that this body is my body, head to toe.
Right. That feels pretty basic.
It is. The second is spatiotemporal self-location, meaning you feel precisely located at a specific point in space and time. You know where you are right now in this moment.
Sure.
And the third is what he calls a weak first-person perspective, or 1PP. This isn't a deep reflective subjective experience in the philosophical sense, but more a purely geometrical feature.
Geometrical? How so?
Like the unique origin point from which your senses project, where you see the world from, where sounds seem to originate around you. It's like the fixed camera position in your internal movie.
Got it. A point of view.
A basic point of view, yes. And Metzinger makes a really important distinction here, one that often trips people up, between agency and ownership.
Agency versus ownership, okay.
He states that a passive, multisensory, globalized experience of owning a body is sufficient for MPS. Think of just lying still, not moving, but still feeling your body as your own. That's MPS.
Sure.
But agency, that feeling of being the author of your actions, the one who does things, who initiates movement or thought, that's a causally enabling condition for MPS development. It helps it develop, but it's not metaphysically necessary for MPS itself.
So you can have that basic sense of self, the MPS, without feeling like you're actively doing anything.
Exactly. MPS, he argues, is something less than agency. It's the groundwork, the very basic feeling of me-ness that allows for agency to eventually emerge, but it doesn't require agency to exist at its core.
And we can actually see this distinction and the nature of MPS itself when things go wrong neurologically.
Precisely. Metzinger views these conditions as powerful entry points for research into conscious selfhood because they highlight what happens when these fundamental components break down or get altered.
Like what? What kind of condition?
Well, take, for instance, somatoparaphrenia. This is a breakdown of partial body ownership. Patients might genuinely misattribute a contralesional hand say, their left hand after a right hemisphere stroke to another person. They'll insist, that's not my hand.
Wow. So they lose the sense of ownership for just one part.
Yes, which highlights that MPS is fundamentally a global property. It's about the whole body. When that global ownership breaks down partially, the brain struggles to make sense of a limb that feels foreign.
That's bizarre. What else?
Then there's heatoscopy, which is truly strange and unsettling. Someone experiences seeing a second own body, often an exact replica of themselves, out there in the world.
Seeing a double.
Yeah, and it often leads to a sensation of being split in two selves, with the patient unsure which body is theirs.
Oh my God.
In these cases, all three MPS dimensions, self-identification, which body is me, self-location, where am I in relation to these two bodies, and that weak 1PP, which body is the source of my perception, become pathological, confused.
And it feels real to them.
Intensely realistic. The patient usually lacks insight into its illusory nature. Imagine your brain showing you a false reality that feels perfectly, terrifyingly real.
Unbelievable. And out-of-body experiences, how do they fit in?
Right, out-of-body experiences, or OBEs.
Hmm.
In these, there's a complete weak 1TP, self-location and self-identification, but with an illusory body at an extracorporeal position.
So you feel like you're outside your physical body looking back at it.
Exactly. People genuinely experience seeing their physical body from a disembodied vantage point, maybe floating above their bed, and they identify with that phantom self that feels separate from their physical body.
Is that like a phantom limb, but for the whole body?
Metzinger views it very much like that. He sees OBEs as generalized versions of the phantom limb phenomenon. Instead of a missing limb being felt, it's a whole body phantom that is perceived as distinct from the physical self. The brain creates an entirely new, albeit illusory, body representation and shifts the sense of you into it.
So these clinical examples,
Yeah.
they aren't just weird anomalies. What's the bigger takeaway?
Metzinger argues they demonstrate a clear continuum between transparency and opacity in our conscious experience, how see-through or how solid our self-model feels.
Ah, right.
This continuum directly influences how realistically we experience our body representation and how strongly we self-identify with it. So for you, the listener, consider this. If your everyday, rock-solid experience of owning your body and being located within it can be so fundamentally altered by specific brain conditions,
Yeah.
what does that tell you about the solidity and permanence of your everyday self? It suggests it's far less fixed and far more constructed than we typically assume. It's operating on subtle brain processes we rarely notice until they break down.
It really makes you question that intuitive feeling of a solid, unchanging me. 2. Consciousness as a dynamic relational phenomenon. Okay, so if this elusive self isn't a fixed thing, but a dynamic process rooted in our biology, how exactly does our brain build that incredibly vivid conscious experience of the world around us? The colors, the sounds, the feelings.
Right. How does the sausage get made, so to speak?
Exactly. And that's where Metzinger goes even deeper, offering a pretty profound critique of traditional views that try to break down perception into simple, discrete, atomic constituents.
The building block idea.
Yeah. He specifically challenges the idea of importing combinatorial semantics, which is a fancy way of saying ideas from logic or language, like a language of thought or atomic symbols, into how we analyze what we consciously experience.
Yeah.
He's saying that experience isn't like building with Lego bricks.
Precisely. He argues that something like a simple phenomenal content, say, the pure, unadulterated experience of the color orange, is not related to a complex phenomenal content, like the robust multimodal experience of holding, smelling, feeling the texture, and experiencing the weight of an actual orange in your hand. In the same way that individual elements relate to a set, it's not a mere combination of perceptual atoms like stacking blocks. Your experience of an orange isn't just orange plus round plus citrusy plus heavy. It's much more integrated than that.
So how does he propose it works instead? If not atoms, then what?
Instead, Metzinger proposes that human brains are not classical von Neumann machines. Like the computers, we use that process information step by step.
Right.
They are dynamical systems that bind features they detect in their environment into perceptual objects by ultra-fast, complex forms of self-organization.
Self-organization.
Yeah.
Meaning the brain sort of figures it out on the fly.
In a way, yes. This binding happens at a subsymbolic level, meaning it's not based on logical rules or symbols we consciously manipulate, but in a non-rule-based representational medium. It's more fluid, more holistic.
So the orange in your hand isn't a perceptual molecule built from bits or just a bag full of features.
Exactly. It's phenomenally experienced as integrated in a much stronger sense. It's an entire seamless experience that emerges from this complex dynamic process.
The theory of consciousness, then, needs to account for this integration.
Absolutely. He insists it must do justice to this integrated and holistic process where individual causal components, like the neurons firing for orange versus round, don't necessarily stand alone on the conscious level. They are inherently intertwined in the final experience.
Can we see this in action somehow? Is there evidence for this relational holistic view?
Oh, definitely. To illustrate this powerful point, let's look at a classic and frankly mind-bending psychological experiment called the Ganzfeld experiment.
Ganzfeld. Okay, what happens there?
In this experiment, participants are exposed to homogeneous visual stimulation. For instance, their entire visual field is filled with a uniform, undifferentiated color, often by wearing translucent goggles, like ping pong ball halves over the eyes.
So just seeing red everywhere, nothing else.
Exactly, or blue or whatever. And what happens, quite remarkably, is that within minutes, the conscious experience of that chromatic color completely vanishes.
Vanishes, but it's still there, right? The light.
The light is still there, but the experience fades. Sometimes, all visual experience disappears entirely. Subjects report phenomena like a diffuse fog, a hazy insipid yellow, a milky substance, or even swimming in a mist of light.
Wow. So the brain just stops seeing it if there's no contrast or change.
Essentially, yes. Deprived of variation and contrast, the brain stops generating the stable perception of the color.
Okay, that is mind-bending. What's the takeaway from Ganzfeld from Metzinger?
The striking takeaway is profound. It shows that simple sensory content like red or blue cannot stand by itself in conscious experience. It is bound into the relational context generated by other phenomenal dimensions.
It needs other things around it to be perceived.
Our brain needs contrast, change, interaction to generate stable perceptions. This leads to a powerful prediction from Metzinger. If you were to have a homogeneous Ganzfeld stimulation of all your sensory organs, imagine total sensory deprivation, perfectly uniform sight, sound, touch, smell. It would lead to either a complete collapse of phenomenal consciousness or, alternatively, alternatively, a takeover by hallucinatory content exclusively generated by internal top-down mechanisms.
Your brain would just start making things up.
Desperate for input, yeah, it might just start generating its own show.
So this means my conscious experience of even a simple sensation, like seeing a specific color, is deeply dependent on its context and other sensory inputs. It's not a standalone building block.
Exactly. It's not simply received from the outside world, but an aspect of a larger, actively constructed whole.
So for me, the listener, does this change how I think about what it means to truly see or hear something? How much of my perception is actively constructed, filled in, or even subtly invented by my brain rather than just received?
It really pushes you in that direction.
Right.
It suggests that what we call reality is far more of a co-creation between the world and our brain's modeling processes than we typically believe.
Okay, so building on that basic self, the MPS, you mentioned a weak first-person perspective. Metzinger talks about a strong one too, right?
Yes, he does. He delves deeper into the first-person perspective, 1PP, making a crucial distinction between the weak 1PP we discussed earlier, that basic geometric point of view, and a strong 1PP.
And what defines the strong 1PP?
The strong 1PP occurs when the brain represents itself, the system as a whole, meaning you, as directed at an object component. Whether that's a perceptual object like an apple, an action goal like reaching for that apple, or even your own body.
So it's about the relationship between me and something else.
Precisely. This, he argues, is what makes consciousness subjective. The system represents itself as representing in real time. It co-represents the representational relation. It's not just seeing an apple, but your brain modeling you seeing the apple.
It's the feeling of I am seeing that apple. It adds the self doing the seeing.
Exactly. It adds that crucial layer, the self that is perceiving, intending, or acting.
So it's the difference between merely observing a scene and actively being in that scene, feeling your own perspective, your own agency within it.
That's a good way to put it. And Metzinger says this feeling of I am doing this or I am knowing this is generated by something he calls the PMIR.
PMIR, okay, what's that stand for?
The phenomenal model of the intentionality relation.
Okay, phenomenal model of the intentionality relation. How does that model actually manifest as an experience? It sounds incredibly complex, yet it's something we feel constantly.
It does sound complex, but think of it as your brain creating a dynamic internal blueprint of you interacting with the world, of your system being directed towards something.
Like when I reach for my coffee.
Exactly. When you reach for your coffee, your brain isn't just executing a motor command, it's generating a vivid internal simulation of my hand reaching for my coffee. It's the system representing its own, being directed at an object, a cup, an idea, even your own body. This constant, transparent self-modeling is what gives rise to the feeling of a subjective I that knows, wills, and acts.
It's the brain constructing the actor in its own internal movie.
Beautifully put. Yes.
And a key part of understanding how these PMIRs develop and how we understand others comes from work on mirror systems. Metzinger worked with Gillies on this.
That's right. Their work on mirror neurons, first discovered in monkeys and later found to have human homologs, is truly remarkable.
What's so special about them?
They fire not only when an action is executed by you, but also when a similar action is observed in someone else.
Seriously? The same neurons?
Or a very similar population, yes. They code not object presence, not just there's a cup, but the relational fact that the organism or an external agent is currently directed at an object component.
So if I reach for a cup, my mirror neurons fire. If I watch you reach for a cup, my mirror neurons fire in a similar way.
Exactly. This system helps us understand others' actions by essentially simulating them within our own brains, automatically and unconsciously.
Wow. So that's like a built-in empathy mechanism.
It certainly points in that direction. This mirror system leads to an automatic, unconscious, pre-reflexive action simulation in humans. This isn't something you consciously choose to do, it just happens.
This simulation plays a major role in what Metzinger calls our epistemic approach to the world, how we come to know and understand things, especially socially. And it's embodied because it uses your pre-existing body model in the brain. It's not just abstract knowledge. It's a bodily simulation of what others are doing.
So when I see someone stumble, part of my brain simulates stumbling.
That's the idea. It gives you an immediate, intuitive grasp of their action and maybe even their intention.
We can even see the roots of this in infant development, right? Which is just incredible.
It really is. Fascinatingly, 18-month-old infants will imitate the intended actions of a person who slips and fails to achieve their goal.
They imitate what the person meant to do.
Yes. But they won't imitate that same failed action if it's performed by a mechanical device like a robot arm.
No way.
And even younger, 6-month-olds react differently to human hands versus mechanical claws. This suggests an early, innate propensity to perceive goal-directedness, specifically in human biological actors. They're already starting to model agency in others. That's amazing. So how does all this tie into something as complex as conscious volition, the feeling that I'm deliberately choosing to act?
Well, Metzinger explains that conscious volition is generated by integrating abstract goal representations, what he calls allocentric motor simulations, like the general idea of getting juice into the current PMIR, that model of you acting right now.
Okay.
When you simply contemplate an action, like idly thinking, maybe I'll get some juice, you experience yourself as a cognitive subject. The goal feels phenomenally opaque. You know you're thinking about it, but it's not you doing it yet. It feels abstract.
Right, it's just India.
But the situation completely changes, he argues, when you integrate that goal into your transparent self model, into that PMIR. In that moment, you don't just think about the action, you identify with it. And this leads to a volitional first-person perspective. It's the moment your brain models the you that is about to act, the you for whom that action is now real and imminent.
So my feeling of doing is my brain modeling myself as doing it, right before or as it happens.
Essentially, yes. This illustrates that your subjective experience of doing, knowing, and interacting is deeply rooted in your brain's incredible ability to dynamically model its own relationship to the world and to others' intentions.
And it implies that understanding someone else's action is, in a way, running a sophisticated pre-conscious simulation of it within my own system.
That's the implication. For you, the listener, how might this shared action ontology, this fundamental, built-in way of understanding actions, influence your empathy, your ability to predict others' behaviors, or even your grasp of their motivations? It suggests a profound pre-reflexive connection that goes far beyond just intellectual understanding.
A deeper kind of connection built right into the system. 3, the paradox of conscious control, autonomy and illusion. That concept of volition brings us to one of the most intriguing, maybe even controversial paradoxes of our conscious experience. The idea of the illusion of conscious will.
Ah, yes, the Wegner influence and Metzinger's take on it.
Right. The initial premise, popularized by psychologist Daniel Wegner, suggests that the experience of conscious will, that feeling you are intentionally doing things, that you are the author of your actions, is, in a sense, an illusion.
Not a direct perception of cause, but an inference.
Exactly. An inference your brain makes after the fact, attributing the action to your conscious thought. This illusion, Wegner argued, helps us attribute authorship, giving us a sense of control and responsibility.
And Metzinger, as a prominent commentator on this, largely agrees that conscious will is a complex phenomenon, and that our sense of ownership of actions can definitely be fooled.
You mean like in certain neurological conditions?
Right. Think about alien hand syndrome, where a person's own hand seems to act autonomously, like it has a mind of its own. Or even the effects of hypnosis, where actions are performed without that feeling of conscious initiation. However, Metzinger takes this concept far beyond just a simple trick of the mind. He emphasizes that this illusion of conscious will isn't just a quirk. It is, in fact, essential for the development of the first-person sense of responsibility.
Essential for responsibility. How so?
Because that feeling of authorship, even if constructed, is what allows us to feel accountable. And this, in turn, he argues, is the very basis for our social and legal sense of responsibility.
So the idea of a person who can be held accountable relies on this feeling of will.
He suggests the very idea of a person itself, capable of moral and legal accountability, is like an elegant accounting system for social interaction and justice, built upon this apparent authorship generated by the brain.
So it's not simply a mere illusion in the sense of being false or useless. It's functionally critical.
Exactly. Metzinger delves into how this illusion, or apparent mental causation, is actually constructed by the brain for incredibly crucial functional purposes. It's a fundamental part of developing a self-identification system that effectively tags actions as belonging to self.
The I did that tag.
Precisely. That tagging is what allows us to say, I did that, and accept the consequences, good or bad. It's a vital part of what makes us social beings capable of responsibility, capable of living in complex societies that demand accountability.
So for you, the listener, if your feeling of conscious will is a construction, does that absolve you of responsibility? Metzinger seems to be saying quite the opposite.
Right. It doesn't diminish responsibility. Rather, it provides the necessary psychological framework for social interaction and accountability. It's the brain's brilliant, if perhaps counterintuitive, solution to a complex social problem.
Okay. Now, beyond bodily actions like reaching for a cup, Metzinger talks about mental actions, right?
Yeah.
Things we do purely in our minds.
Yes, exactly. Just as there are bodily actions, there are mental actions. Things like deliberately focusing your attention, consciously drawing a conclusion, making a mental calculation, or even choosing to recall a specific memory.
And like physical actions, these have goals, require effort.
Yes, and crucially, they can be inhibited or terminated at will, or at least that's how it often feels.
The first crucial type he highlights is attentional agency, or AA.
That's right. AA is simply the ability to control one's focus of attention. Metzinger describes it as a phenomenal property. It's the conscious experience of actively initiating a shift of attention.
Like when I deliberately tune out the noise and focus on your voice right now.
Exactly that. It involves a distinct sense of effort, a feeling of, I'm doing this focusing. He argues it's probably the earliest, simplest form of experiencing oneself as an epistemic agent, knowing self who can direct their own mental resources.
And like perception, it's transparent.
Yes, AA is fully transparent. You don't perceive the complex underlying self-modeling process your brain is doing. You just experience the direct act of selecting what to pay attention to. It feels like an effortless, direct act of will.
Okay. And then there's cognitive agency, CA.
Right. CA is the ability to control goal-task-related deliberate thought. Things like mental calculation, engaging in rational symbolic thought, systematically solving a problem in your head.
Like planning out the steps to build something or doing math mentally.
Precisely. And it also has a distinct phenomenology, a unique feeling associated with it, like the feeling of, I am a thinking self in the act of grasping a concept, or I am deliberately working through this problem.
So both AA and CA involve this sense of being an epistemic agent, a self that knows and thinks.
Exactly. Both involve consciously representing ourselves as epistemic agents, where the system has a conscious self-representation of itself as capable of knowing, thinking, and guiding attention. This overarching model of yourself as a knowing and acting agent is what he calls the epistemic agent model, or EAM.
The EAM. Okay, and here's where it gets really interesting and maybe a bit startling, because Metzinger presents a finding that cuts right to the core of our perceived control over our own minds.
Ah, yes, the autonomy finding. It's quite something.
He says, for about 2/3 of their conscious lifetime, human beings do not possess mental autonomy. Autonomy. Wait, 2/3?
2/3. Let that sink in for a moment. It means that rational mental self-control, the ability to deliberately terminate thoughts at will, or to impose rules on your mental behavior, to truly control what you're thinking and for how long, these are comparatively rare phenomena.
So most of the time, we're not in control of our thoughts.
That's the implication. It's not the norm, it's the exception.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's profound. So our conscious thought, most of the time, is just happening.
He argues it's primarily and predominantly an automatic subpersonal process, much like your heartbeat, your digestion, or your immune regulation. Vital processes, but operating beneath the level of conscious, deliberate control.
So autonomous cognitive self-control is an exception, not the rule.
That's his argument. It's a precious and often fleeting state. And this realization, he suggests, doesn't just challenge our intuition, it leads to a new mind-body problem.
Which is,
How does this automatic subpersonal cognition, this stuff just bubbling up, relate to our personal level thought, the one we identify with as I, and attribute to our conscious self? It's like realizing most of your mental activity is running on autopilot, and you only occasionally grab the steering wheel.
that's a powerful image. And he warns against some fallacies when talking about this.
Yes, he often points out two common philosophical pitfalls: the mereological fallacy and the homunculus fallacy.
Okay, remind me.
The mereological fallacy is when you wrongly ascribe properties of the whole organism to parts of the brain, like saying the prefrontal cortex plans actions or the amygdala feels fear.
Oh.
It's the person who plans or feels using those brain regions, not just the region itself.
Right.
And the homunculus fallacy, as we touched on, is ascribing mental properties like knowing or deciding to tiny, intelligent, subpersonal entities within the brain. Our brains aren't run by little people inside.
They're complex, automatic processes much of the time, and our conscious experience emerges from that.
Exactly. And the most common relatable example of this loss of autonomy, something we all experience daily, is mind wandering.
Ah, yes. Zoning out, daydreaming.
Precisely. Metzinger explains that mind wandering is characterized by a collapse of the EAM, the epistemic agent model we just discussed, that feeling of being a knowing and acting self.
So when my mind wanders, that sense of I am doing the thinking fades away.
Largely, yes. In that state, the stable subject-object structure, that feeling of a knowing or acting self directed towards specific objects, is mostly absent. Instead of consciously engaging with the world or task, your mind drifts.
So what remains when my mind wanders? Am I just blank?
Not entirely. While the EAM collapses, a low-resolution situation model persists. This includes an integrated representation of your body located in space and time, possibly passively minimizing prediction error.
Meaning my brain is still keeping track of basics, like where I am if anything surprising happens.
Exactly. Your brain is still quietly monitoring your body and immediate environment for unexpected events, just without that strong, directed I engaging with specifics. But the stable subject-object structure, the I doing something or knowing something, is lacking. It's like the movie is still playing, but the protagonist, you, has stepped out for a moment.
Huh. And what about time? When my mind wanders, I often think about the past or future.
Right. Metzinger notes that during mind wandering, temporal self-location is now partly dissociated from the process of spatial self-location. You might be sitting in your chair, spatial location, but your mind is vividly reliving a past conversation or planning a future vacation, temporal location shifted.
And where does my sense of I go then?
The phenomenal unit of identification, UI, that I am this experience shifts. For example, it might shift to the protagonist of your mind-wandering episode, like a future self involved in autobiographical planning, or a past self reliving an event. You identify with the imagined you in the mental simulation rather than the you physically present in the chair.
So this realization directly impacts my daily experience. For you, the listener, how often do you truly feel in deliberate, conscious control of your thoughts?
Yeah.
How much of your conscious thought is simply your brain running on autopilot, generating ideas, memories, plans, without your explicit command? What are the implications for productivity, creativity, self-awareness?
It suggests that our internal lives are far less guided by a conscious me than we typically believe, and that true mental autonomy, that ability to direct our thoughts, is maybe a skill to be cultivated, not just something we inherently possess all the time.
Skill.
Yeah.
That's an interesting way to frame it.
Yeah.
4, why does this matter to you? The real-world implications. Okay, so we've explored the elusive self as a process, consciousness as a constructed model, and even the intermittent reality of our conscious control. But why does this complex philosophy and neuroscience stuff matter to you, listening right now?
Right, the so what question.
Exactly, and Metzinger suggests it deeply impacts one of our most fundamental human experiences, mortality, how we grapple with the fact that we die.
He argues that the human conscious self model is utterly unique among known biological systems because it has this inbuilt conflict.
An inbuilt conflict. Between what?
Between two fundamental layers of our being. On one hand, our emotional layer, the ancient, deeply ingrained part of our brain, has a very strong biological imperative to survive. It screams, you must not die, avoid pain, seek pleasure, live.
Okay, the survival instinct.
Right. But on the other hand, our brand new, slow cognitive self-model in the frontal lobe, the part responsible for reasoning, planning, self-awareness, gives us clear, conscious, and explicit knowledge that we will die.
The knowledge versus the feeling.
Precisely. This creates a profound chasm or schism or split within us. It creates a constant intent in beings like us to become whole again, to heal ourselves, an attempt to reconcile what we know with what we feel must not be true.
That tension. It sounds like the root of a lot of human striving, maybe. Religion, philosophy, art.
It could well be. Metzinger frames mortality as a core issue that is also relevant for everybody, not just academics. He poses a powerful question for us all. Can one truly come to terms with it without fooling oneself?
Without resorting to comforting illusions or denial.
Exactly. Can we face that reality squarely? This deep insight impacts how we live, how we make choices, how we find meaning in a world where our conscious self is fundamentally aware of its own impermanence. It's a foundational challenge that shapes our very constructed self, compelling us to seek coherence between feeling and knowing.
Okay, so given these insights, the constructed self, the limited control Metzinger goes further, calling for a new ethics of consciousness. What does that mean?
It's not just about what's right or wrong in a traditional moral sense, like stealing or lying. It's about a more fundamental ethical question regarding our inner lives. Like, what kinds of conscious states are wholesome, and what habits of attention do we want to cultivate within ourselves? It's an ethical imperative to take responsibility for and actively shape our own inner lives and the conscious experiences we generate or allow ourselves to be subjected to.
Taking responsibility for our inner world. And central to this, he argues, is reclaiming our attentional agency, that ability to control focus.
Yes, absolutely. He sees that as the deepest core of the sense of self, and he issues a pretty stark warning here.
Which is?
He says that the entertainment and advertisement industries are, in his view, attention robbers, constantly attacking us and our children by trying to hijack this very capacity.
Wow. Strong words. Attention robbers.
Yeah. Think about the algorithms designed specifically to keep your eyes glued to a screen, maximizing engagement time, which often means deliberately fragmenting your attention, making it harder to sustain focus.
And modern life itself.
Yeah.
Constant notifications, the interruptions.
Exactly. An average of every 11 minutes, he cites, often self-generated by our own habits of checking phones or switching tabs. This trains our brains, essentially, to be inattentive and fragmented.
So this constant distraction isn't just annoying, it's an attack on the self.
That's his argument. If your self is a dynamic process that depends on directed, sustained attention to maintain that coherent EAM, then constant distraction literally erodes that self.
But can we fight back? Can we train ourselves?
Yes. Drawing on the profound insights of William James, who argued that habit is the basic unit of mental life and that the essence of free will lies in being able to direct and sustain one's attention. Thompson, one of Metzinger's colleagues, emphasizes that we can train ourselves to be attentive. This isn't a passive state, it's a practice, like training a muscle. Think mindfulness, meditation, focused work habits.
So for you, the listener, in this age of information overload where external forces are constantly vying for your attention, how vital is it to reclaim control over your own focus?
Metzinger would say it's absolutely critical. For the sake of your selfhood, your well-being, your ability to think deeply and live deliberately, it's like a new form of digital hygiene or maybe even mental self-defense.
Mental self-defense, I like that. Okay, finally, let's look at how Metzinger's ideas intersect with emerging technologies, particularly virtual reality, VR.
Right. He finds VR incredibly useful, not just as entertainment, but as a fruitful conceptual metaphor to understand consciousness itself.
How so? Because our own consciousness is already a kind of VR, the ego tunnel.
Exactly. If our own consciousness is already a virtual model, then VR technology provides an incredibly practical and importantly ethical way to experimentally explore how these internal models are constructed, how they can be manipulated, and what the implications are for our sense of self. It's like having a laboratory for consciousness.
So we can use VR to tweak the sense of self.
Precisely. VR research, for instance, is helping us experimentally manipulate the phenomenal unit of identification, UI, that fundamental I am this experience. Researchers are exploring the concept of a volume control for self-identification in VR. They can make the UI drift toward an avatar so you feel more and more identified with a virtual body that isn't your physical one.
Like the rubber hand illusion, but with a whole avatar.
Kind of like that, yeah. This allows us to understand the neurofunctional correlates of bodily self-consciousness in a tangible, reproducible way. We can map the brain processes that give rise to the feeling of owning a body, even a virtual one. It takes the abstract philosophy and makes it empirically testable.
And this leads to some pretty wild, almost sci-fi level questions, like the other mind's problem.
It does. Could social VR create more direct forms of knowing another person's mind? Could it potentially allow us to acquire phenomenological concepts like red or joy as applied to others, not just inferring them from behavior?
Could it even lead to a virtual mind swap, feeling what it's like to be someone else through their avatar?
It raises the possibility. Imagine the potential for empathy and understanding if we could truly walk a mile in someone else's virtual shoes, embodying their perspective in a way never before possible.
That's incredible. And this leads to a whole new field he calls VR epistemology, the study of knowledge in VR.
Exactly. It asks fundamental questions. How do we gain knowledge about virtual objects? How do we form justified beliefs about facts holding in a virtual world? Are the conditions for knowledge? What counts as knowing something different in VR than in physical reality?
Does seeing a virtual tree count as seeing a tree? Does learning a skill in a simulation count as truly knowing it?
These are the kinds of questions VR epistemology tackles. It pushes us to redefine what we consider real knowledge and what it means to be a knower in these increasingly mediated realities.
And what about amnestic re-embodiment? That sounds fascinating.
Yeah, that's the idea of being re-embodied in VR without conscious memory of entering it. It links back to Descartes' classic dream argument.
Well,
How do you know you're not dreaming right now?
if you woke up in VR with no memory of putting on the headset, how would you know it wasn't real?
Precisely. Metzinger also touches on epistemic innocence, where seemingly suboptimal mental processes, like perhaps a controlled delusion induced in VR, might actually have unexpected epistemic benefits.
Like new self-knowledge.
Potentially. Imagine a therapeutic VR scenario where you re-embody yourself without knowing it's VR, maybe gaining profound insights into your own mind or past trauma by experiencing it from a radically new perspective.
But these technologies also raise huge ethical questions, right? Which brings back his ethics of consciousness.
Oh, absolutely. The ethical dilemmas are significant. Consider his stark example. A VR user whose aggressive fantasy, involuntarily accompanied by motor imagery, causes a robot they are identified with to commit a violent act in a VR setting.
Whoa. So if your virtual body acts, who is responsible?
Exactly. It immediately raises complex questions about responsibility and personal autonomy when the lines between reality and virtuality become so blurred. What are the boundaries of yourself when your experience can be so radically transformed and manipulated? Where does you end and the simulation begin?
And in a really speculative, mind-bending twist, he connects this to religion.
Yes, he suggests that the evolution of religion itself can be seen, perhaps metaphorically, as the evolution of pre-technological augmented reality AR systems.
How does he figure that?
He proposes that ancient religious rituals, beliefs, immersive experiences, transcendent narratives, these might have expanded human phenomenology and motivation, enabling large-scale cooperation and social cohesion, sort of like an overlay on reality.
And the connection to VR.
He then asks, could there be religious practice in VR? Could we have a VR heaven or VR churches that could potentially offer similar profound psychological and social effects to traditional religious experiences, but through technological means?
That's a lot to think about. Using technology to create spiritual experiences.
It forces us to consider the very nature of spiritual experience in a digital age. So for you, the listener, as technology continues to blur these lines between reality and virtuality, how might our fundamental sense of self, our ethics, and even our spiritual practices be transformed?
The future of human experience might look radically different. Metzinger's work really provides a crucial framework for understanding and hopefully ethically navigating that future.
I think so too. It gives us tools to think critically about it.
We've covered a remarkable amount of ground today, a true deep dive into the insights of Thomas Metzinger. His work isn't just abstract philosophy. It offers profound, maybe even actionable insights into the nature of your conscious experience. We see that the self is a dynamic process, not a static thing. That perception is an active construction, not a passive reception. That our mental control is surprisingly intermittent, not constant. And that our deepest existential questions, like mortality, are interwoven with how our brains build our reality.
It's a powerful framework, really. It invites a kind of radical shift in perspective on ourselves.
And as you go about your day, observing your own mind and the world around you, maybe consider this final provocative thought. If the universe, through us, is evolving systems that have an image of the world as a whole, and if our individual first-person perspectives are changing how we view the physical universe itself, then what is the ultimate impact of your individual conscious journey on the cosmos? Is your awareness, in its own unique way, contributing to the universe's understanding of itself, perhaps even expanding it?
That's a deep thought to end on. Something to mull over.
Keep exploring the fascinating frontiers within and around you. This has been The Deep Dive. Till next time.